now that we've also sketched the ceilings for the project, in this next step, we're going to get to the architectural flooring and the wall finishes. So if we take a look at this finish table, we can see that there are certain floorings and wall finishes for each area. For example, over here we've got the staircase, for the floor of which we're going to need to use white china stone, and also as for the dimensions, it says according to details. So then we're going to have to take a look at the details and see what it requires. Or for example, if we take a look at the ground level, which is the one we're working on, we can see that for the service corridors, it says we need to use black marble with dimensions 20 by 60 and thickness of 2 centimeters. Or even for the elevator lobby, again we need to use black marble for the flooring. And as for the wall finishes, if we take a look under the wall section, we can see that the service corridor's final coverage, it says we need to use white back-painted glass. Also, as for the elevator lobby, it says there needs to be cement lining. Also, as for the service rooms, they don't need any finish walls. Also, as for the flooring, we can see that it says they don't have any. So you're just gonna have to create the different types of walls and floors based on this table, and then draw them into the project. It's not very complicated, but as for the height of the finished walls, you need to always remember that they need to start from the FFL, or the finished floor level, and then they go all the way up to the ceiling, or false ceiling if there is any. But also here's another thing, which is that should we start with flooring and then have the wall finishes go on them, or is it that we place the finished walls first and then the floors? You see, that really depends on your project's installation details. For example, there are some projects where first you need to place the finished walls, starting from the TOS level, and then you get to the flooring process. So the walls are going to be surrounding the floors. But on the other hand, the way that most projects are, is that you first draw the flooring of the levels, and then you begin to place the finished walls onto those floors. So that just really depends on the details of your project, or you could just go either way, but usually we first work on the floors and then place the finished walls on them. So if you would agree, first we're going to go and create the different types that we need, and then we're going to start drawing. Also for this project, I'm going to begin with the flooring and then the finished walls. Okay, so for the ground floor that we are working on, these are the area names. We have the service corridor branches, lobby and the seating area, elevator lobby, and finally the service rooms. But for now we don't have anything to do with the last one, so let's begin with the service corridor branches. You see the flooring of these 3 areas are the same, and they need to be black marble tiles. We also have their dimensions here, so we're going to go over to Revit and create the floors, then assign the material to them, as well as the tile, and then we're going to draw them. So I'm just going to go to the AutoCAD and show you the areas first. And this right here is the ground level. Alright, these right here are the service rooms, and if we also look in the legend for GF01s, we can also see that they indicate the service rooms. Now these areas that you see over here are in fact GF06, and if we go check in the legend, we can see that GF06 is for the information. Just like how in this table we said that for the reception and information, the floor needs to be black marble tile. So the flooring that we need for these areas are all the same, unless you are specifically required to make the information area have different flooring from the lobby. But if you weren't, you could just draw it all the same. Now, we also have some areas around here, which are GF07s. So let's go check in the legend to see where they are. We can see it's for the garbage shooting. Now, we don't have anything for the garbage shooting in this table, but for example, if we scroll down further, for example, in the water discharge areas, here we can see the garbage storage, cleaning room and garbage chute, and the floor of which needs to be non-slippery ceramic tiles, 30 by 30. So you can also figure out the information about the flooring of these areas further down. Now first let's go to the floorings of the non-mechanical and non-watery areas and draw them first. So I'm going to go over here and duplicate this floor. Then I'm going to name it Kimio. And we also said that they needed to be marble stone, so I'm just going to make it short and write stone. 120 by 60 by 2. You could even add centimeter to the end. Now also let me tell you something before I readjust the parameters. You see, it's also really good that you mention the name of the area in the name of that type. Alright, so remember to also include the areas so you would know which one this type belongs to. For example, you could just write its code. Okay, so the codes of these areas, for example, GF06. Or instead of the code, you could just write its name, which is reception. So this is also something that you can add to the name of your types and include the name of the areas. There is also another way of drawing the floorings and the wall finishes, which I'm going to explain to you later, and it's also faster. For example, it would be good to write the name of the areas there. Now we're going to move on, click OK, and then in the thickness I'm going to make it 2 centimeters, and then I'm going to go into the materials and duplicate this one first, and then I'm going to name it stone 120 by 60. So since this is a tile, we're going to also add the dimensions. After that, I'm going to go over here to assign a surface pattern to it. For example, this is a 20 by 20 tile. So first I'm going to duplicate it, and then for its name I'm going to make it 120 by 60. Now for the spacing, I'm going to make it 1.2, and this one 0.6. Then I'm going to click OK. And so we have made one of our flooring types. Now we could use it to, for example, draw the flooring for this area. So for example, I'm going to start from down here. For example, down to the ending of the area, and then start to floor it. For example, we start from this point and go as far as we need, and it's also good that we have a CAD plan, so we would know exactly where we need to draw. Now, something we had with this project was that we didn't know if we needed to start the flooring from outside of these partitions, or from inside them, or even what details it has. We were told that we needed to start the flooring from the middle of this glass, and not just for this area, but also for this one. So that's the reason why we started from the middle of this glass. So I'm going to go over here and also exclude these columns, and then I'm going to select here, like so, and draw the floors for around the area. Then we have here, and then we go down here, as well as these parts. Okay, so now let's see what we've got here. We're gonna have to skip this part, we don't need it. And then we're gonna continue over here. And just like that, we're gonna draw the floors all around. And then for parts like this, it depends on your project's details as to where you need to draw. Like you may need to start from the glass or from here. For example, I'll choose the latter. Next, we're going to go over here. And then I'm going to go up. But you see, we're not going to go all the way here because that'll be the elevator lobby. So we're going to stop before it because that one needs a different flooring. So we're going to go the other way. I'm going to also draw over here. Then I'm going to draw over here. And I'm just going to continue that way. Also, like I said, you could even draw continuously towards the upper area, or you could just draw each one of them separately. Once again, that really just depends on your own project's details. Alright, so I'm going to continue drawing this part. Then go over here, starting from the middle again. Then I'm going to go over here. And then we also need to make some modifications later, because it's definitely not finished at this point. Okay, so for example, I'm going to separate this part from this area. And like I said, I'm going to draw the flooring of this part separately. Now I'm going to continue over here and then draw this one. And also make sure to go around the columns. Now you could also do this much easily and faster by using Dynamo. That's going to be one of the things we're going to talk about later. Now first let me try to edit the floor so that we could finish it in the first step. And then after that we're going to make further additions if necessary. Also we're going to trim these two together, as well as these two, then trim these two together. And there's also this other column which we need to go around. Like so. Okay, so there seems to be another problem over here where we can't see what we have. So I'm just going to ignore it and continue drawing in a straight line. And then I'm going to trim these, then these two, then these two lines together, then there's also trimming these two, and then I'm going to have to go up and draw the floor up to here, and then also connect these together. Let's do it again, connecting these two together. And also I'm going to edit that part where I drew the straight line later, but for now I just want to finish the floor so we could just see how it's turned out. And after that I'm going to get to the parts that need editing. Also, you could choose not to go around the columns and instead join the floors later. We're going to also trim these two together, and then this one with this one. Now let's see what errors we get. We have one for this part. So I'm going to have to trim these two lines together. And let me redraw this area. And now let's go check out the other parts. We have another error here. And then there's also this part that just got highlighted. There's also something else going on here. Then I'm going to trim these. And now we have another error down here. Alright, so for this part we're going to have to draw like this first. And then trim the lines. There's also another error over here, which it seems to be the one that I said had some issues. Okay, so here's our floor. Alright, so we have finished drawing the flooring, which we've also separated from the other area, just to make a distinction between those two even though they look the same. So you could either do what I did, or just draw both of the areas in one go. Now I'm going to go over here and I can once again either edit it, or I could just join the lines. But remember that the only time you can try joining is if you have the structural in your project. For example, now that I have linked the structure into here, I can't join it. So I'm just going to have to go around the column by using the split command. So I'm going to split this line and then trim these two lines together, and then this one with this one. So also I'm going to need to do that for all of the columns around here. Just split the extra straight line first, and then trim around the column. Okay, so I'm going to click Finish. And so now we have the flooring for one area, which also starts from the FFL. Now, as for this area, we said that we needed a flooring that is 5 centimeters thick, which was what was required by the project's details. So first I'm going to select these two and put them aside. Select generic annotations, and then I'm going to take these and move them outside of the project since they just belong to Revit. Now let's also try to draw the floorings for some of the mechanical areas. For example, here we had a garbage chute, so let's go draw its floor. First I'm going to take a look at its CAD plan. And you see, for example, that area was for the garbage chute. Now, based on the finish table, what was the material that we needed for that part? It was supposed to be non-slippery ceramic with dimensions 30 by 30. Now, here's the thing about this part. We did say that our FFL was supposed to be 10 centimeters from the SSL or the TOS level. So basically that just means that our floorings need to be 10 centimeters thick. Also, over here for this stone type that we have made, we put 2 centimeters for thickness, which is just the thickness of the stones. This 2 centimeters is only the stone's thickness, whereas you need to also add the thickness of the foundation to that value. So for example, all of them together would be 10 centimeters. Now for example, for the service corridor branches, it says the foundation needs to be a light concrete with industrial pumice. Okay, so we know that we need some fillings beneath the stones. For example, if I open the detail sheet for you over here, and let's say we're going to go over to this detail for the flooring. Now, if you take a look around here, you can see that it says how your flooring layers should be, and you'll just have to look through the details and find the area on which you are working and see what it needs. You see, for example, over here we have the parking flooring details. So we could just find the information we need for that in here. Or for example, here we have the dry areas flooring in the levels. And then here we have the final coverage based on the instructions, which is for example stone for this one. In this area we have cement and mortar, and below it concrete foam. And also the thickness of the sandstone with the stone is 5 centimeters. So that makes it 3 centimeters of mortar. And then the concrete foam or the industrial pumice is also 5 centimeters thick. So we're just going to have to go over here and also consider what filling we need to use for which type. So we need to also consider the layers. So you see what we have drawn over here is only the flooring, and we've also only considered these stones that are going to be laid. The 2 centimeters here is only the thickness of the stones, whereas we need to add some more layers, which will go under them. Now, some people may consider 10 centimeters as the thickness of the stones without adding any more layers, and then just continue along with those settings. But it's also good that you make it more detailed and add the layers as well. For example, I could go over here and then put, for example, 3 centimeters for mortar thickness, and for its function I'm going to put finish, and then I'm going to add 5 centimeters of thickness for the concrete foam. I could even make it more detailed and also add the material. So first I'm going to duplicate this one, and for example I'm going to name it concrete, or you could name it whatever else you want. And that's going to be about it. I'm not going to need to add any patterns, but I might want to assign a color to it. For example, make it darker, so just give it a material and then move on. Now for the next one, we're going to once again duplicate a material. And for example, I'm going to name the other one cement. Okay, so that's it, and that goes the layer. And so now we have a flooring of 10 centimeters of thickness. Now for example, when we get to the flooring of the garbage chute, we're gonna have to repeat the same things. First, we assign an underlayer and a layer for concrete foam. And as for the wet areas, we're gonna have to go according to details. For example, if we take a look over here, I'm gonna go to, let's say, the corridor of the floors. We have stone mortar, concrete foam. This is just like the previous ones, and we have almost the same things for the rest of the areas like the elevator lobby or others. Now, for example, for the floorings of the commercial buildings, we can see it says the final flooring layer will be selected and installed by the buyer. So for that, we were told to draw a 5 centimeter generic floor. You can also see the thickness here, and we need to also leave 5 centimeters for the layer beneath it. Now, for example, here we have some floor drain details, or the flooring of the management offices. And then here we have an area that is dry and wet, where we have the connection between the wet and the dry area. So these details need to be considered in the types. And for example, the flooring of the wet areas goes like this. Final coverage based on the table, then we have the sandstone mortar, we need some insulation, and then light concrete with mineral pumice. So you could also make lots of use of this detail for the flooring of your levels. Alright, so now let's go floor some other areas. For example, we've got some mechanicals, or like I said, we could just get to the flooring of the garbage shooting area. Now, if we take a look over here, we can see that down here we have GF04, which seems to be the electric room. So I'm going to go over here to take a look at the table. We've got the MEP areas here. Okay, so now we have the electric rooms here. So let's see what we need for its flooring. And its material is cotton flower granite. Dimensions 40 by 40, and the thickness is supposed to be 3 centimeters. Once again, we need 2 centimeters of mortar and 5 centimeters for its foundation. So we're gonna go over here, and we were meaning to draw this area. Let's double check. We were going for this area underneath the staircase. So that'll be over here. Now here's something about this part. You see, the architectural doesn't match the structural plan. For example, this door that we drew here, which was in the architectural, as well as this door over here, they don't match what we have in the structural. Also, let me turn the CAD file on. The door goes over here, but that doesn't match what we have drawn. So the architectural and the structural plans aren't coordinated. So you're gonna have to also report these clashes. For example, for the parts where the opening is not fitting, or the architectural and structural don't match, all of those need to be reported. So for example, for this part, we might need to move the door and bring it higher. So this way you could just catch the clashes, and therefore one of the pros of modeling all of the disciplines in one file is that you can catch them. Okay, so let's draw this area. I'm gonna select the floor, and then I'm gonna duplicate that type. And then in its name, I'm going to add the dimensions that I need to draw it in. The dimensions were 40 by 40. And this one is going to be 3. And then here we have 40 by 40. And also we can add the name of the area to the name of the type. That's also up to you, of course. After that, I'm going to go over here, and these seem to be fine, and only I'm going to have to assign the material. But first I'm going to need to make the thickness 3 centimeters, and this one I'm going to make it 2 to make it even more precise. Then I'm going to go over here and duplicate this material, and then I'm going to rename it to 40 by 40, and I'm going to also duplicate the pattern, and then I'm going to make that one 40 by 40 as well. Then for its spacing, 0.4 and 0.4. And then I'm going to start from here to this corner right here, and also going around the parts we don't need. I'm going to split this line, then trim these two together, and then these two. So this is what our floor is going to look like. You're going to have to draw the flooring of all of the areas you have in your projects like this. But also remember to draw the floorings of each area separately, because that way you could separate them in your schedules. And then when you get to the 4 dimensionals, you could very easily assign different codes to those areas and also determine the installation time for it. So remember to floor each area individually so that you could also schedule them separately. Now the flooring of this zone is a bit time consuming and I'm gonna have to draw all of them. But what matters is that we learn the process together. First we need to take a look at the finish table and then double check the details. And then we're gonna create the flooring types based on the details and then draw them. Now after the flooring we get to place in the finished walls, the process of which is pretty much very similar to what we did for the flooring. For example, I could go over here and look for the electrical room, then go under the wall section, and then I'm going to look in the electrical room row, which is this one. It's going to have to be this one. Now let's check its finish wall, and the material for it is whitewash cement coating. So I'm going to have to make a type and assign this material to it. So that way you could very easily draw the finished walls as well. Also, as for the thickness of these walls you're going to be placing, you could also figure that out by taking a look at the details you have at hand. So I'm going to go over here and see if I can find it in the details. Usually they tell it to you directly. Also, you could check around the finish table and see if there is anything about the thickness of those walls or not. For example, in this table we have here, it says nothing about that. Now, if we take a look in CAD, we can see this wall right here along with its finish wall, by which we could figure out the thickness. Or we could take a look further and take a look at another detail, for example, this water closet one. We could check the thickness of the walls here. So I'll get a distance from here to here, which will give me 0.3. And I'm going to also check the scale, which is 1/10. So that makes it 3 centimeters. So the finished walls around here are 3 centimeters thick. I could also measure another one to make sure. But anyway, throughout this project we had 3 centimeters for wall thicknesses. But still, you can always double check with your client or just check out the detail that they've given to you and draw according to that. Alright, so I'm gonna go over here to this electrical room. And first I'm gonna make a finished wall type. So I'm gonna drop this down, select a basic wall, it makes no difference which one. Then I'm gonna duplicate it and name it Kimia / and then I'm gonna add the material. So I'm gonna make it wall 3 centimeter, or I could just put the thickness at the end and just make it wall cement / followed by the name of the area. And then I'm going to add the thickness. Then I'm going to go over here and make this 3 centimeters. And also for the material, you could just use that cement material that you used previously. It doesn't make that much of a difference. Or you could even duplicate it for in case you want to assign a different surface pattern. Now I'm going to click OK. And also because we usually don't assign any surface patterns, I could have just used that previous material, but preferably duplicate to have 2 separate materials. So now we're going to click OK, and I'm just going to go over here and set the function to finish. Not to mention that we usually separate the finished walls from the hard walls. The reason for that is that when it comes to multi-layer walls, things might get a little complex in the project and greatly slow down the process. But if we separate the thin walls from the hard walls, that makes things a lot faster. That way we could adjust the height of each wall separately, and then we won't have to deal with the attachment issues. We could just draw them all individually and have the thin walls go up to the ceiling and the hard walls down to the TOS, and we won't have to deal with wall grooves or anything. We could just go ahead and place things easily. Also, a problem that is created by drawing the thin walls from the hard walls separately in projects is that after that we need to join the thins with the hards, and that's because this door over here can't go inside the thin finish wall. So in order to be able to place it correctly, we need to join the hard walls with the finish walls. Now I'm gonna also hide this CAD plan. For example, over here, first we're gonna have to adjust the view range so that this door would appear in the view. For example, I'm gonna lower the cut plane so that there's an opening for the door. So you see over here, this finished wall has not been split and the door is still blocked. So we would need to join the hard wall with the finished wall, and that'll result in unblocking the doorway. But one thing about it is that when you're working on the bigger projects, it would be very time consuming if you try to join all of the hard walls with the finished walls. Now there is a Dynamo code which will do this for you automatically, but also considering the size of the project and how big it is, it may take some time to join all of the hard walls in the project with the finished walls. But it's actually very useful, and it's so much better than having to do it all manually. But also in version 2025 of Revit, we've got a huge update which really helps us speed up the process. In this update, there's this new tool that's been added which is called Auto Join. Here it is, you can find it in this tab. Its name is Auto Join, and it automatically joins the walls after you finish drawing them, which is very, very useful. That makes things a lot faster, because even this Dynamo code that I told you about takes some time for bigger projects, but it's still so much better than joining walls manually. But also, if while you are drawing you are able to auto join, that would be very helpful. Also, I think this is a very huge progress in the 2025 version, which even encourages us to use this version for the future projects, because having this tool actually speeds up the process by so much. Now also, not everybody has this 2025 version, and we might not be able to always use it. But despite of that, if you are able to, I recommend that you go ahead and use this version. And another tip that I'm going to give you is that you draw the hard walls from the finished walls separately, because otherwise you may come across some problems which may be hard to manage in the bigger projects. You see, when you draw the hard walls and the finished walls all the same, as in if you try to draw one multi-layer wall, then you'd have to adjust their heights one by one, rectify the grooves. You also won't have a separate schedule, like you can't get a schedule of only the finished walls, and it's just going to make things a lot harder, so it would be a lot easier for you if you draw them separately, especially with this new tool that's been added to Revit, this Auto Join. Now we don't have a reason not to draw the walls separately. So now that we've got this Auto Join option in Revit, the problem of drawing the hard walls separate from the finished walls has been solved, and it's very useful. Besides that, we also have Auto Join and Lock, which also locks the walls. It locks finish to hard wall, and then there won't be a gap between them, so that's actually very important. Now I'm going to delete this, and then I'm going to go over here, and this time I'm going to draw this finished wall by using Auto Join. So I'll select Pick Line, and I'm going to also select the line shape, then start from here, then press the space bar, then go all the way down, and as you can see, it automatically creates the door opening. That's because the walls have been automatically joined. Now, if I go back over here and this time draw with Auto Join and Lock, then that'll even make for the cherry on top, and it makes the process a lot better. Now let's try to move this. You can see that this wall has moved along with it. So you could also use one of these tools if you are working with the 2025 version, which are some very useful tools that we didn't have in the older versions, not even in the 2024 version, and it's only been added and introduced in version 2025. So you see, this is what happens, but if you auto join and lock, then that would be even better. Then the walls will be connected and move along. So this is such a useful tool, and it's actually one of the best features that the version 2025 has added. Okay, so that's it about the joining. Now let's review what we've learned. First, we need to make sure that we draw the hard walls separate from the finished walls in all of the projects. We're going to have to draw them all separately, then we adjust their heights. And also, if you are working with versions of Revit older than 2025, then after you're done drawing the finished walls, you're going to have to go to the Modify tab, then select Join, and then join the hard walls with the finished walls to make a hole for the door. But if you are working with the 2025 version, then make sure that you enable this Auto Join and Lock while you are drawing, so that it joins the walls automatically. As for the older versions, you could use a Dynamo code, which I'm going to explain all about it to you in the later videos, and that one also is very helpful, and speeds up your process if you are working with older versions of Revit. Okay, so here there's not much left for us to do. We're just gonna have to adjust the heights. The base constraint is at the FFL, or the finished floor level, and also if we have a ceiling here, then the wall would have to go up to below it, and if not, we're not going to change the height and have it go all the way up. So there's really not much left to do here, except we're gonna need to adjust the finished wall's heights. If you have a ceiling in the area, then the wall would have to go up to below that ceiling. You could also have it on unconnected mode, or you could just set a negative offset to the wall's height and make it something below the ceiling's offset. So you're just gonna have to adjust the height or fix it if you need, and therefore you will be finished with the flooring and creating the finished walls. So if you are working with the 2025 version of Revit, make sure you use that auto join tool. And so I'm going to continue drawing the flooring and the finished walls for these areas, and then I'm going to show you the finished results. Alright friends, so what you see over here is actually the flooring that's been done for all of the levels in the project, and also the flooring of each area is separate from the other. So here is the completed flooring of the project. Also, in this part over here, the finished walls have all been placed, so you can take a look at them and double check them in 3D view. And so all of the finished walls have been placed for the project. Also, I'm going to create a section box into that level which we were working on. I'm going to bring this side down and go down a little bit more. I'm going to rotate it and go down a little bit more. And so these are all the finished walls for each area, for example the service rooms, as well as the garbage shooting, and all the other areas that we had in this level. So this way you can sketch any level or area's finished walls and flooring.